All women were being shaved bald in the town. Then cowboys came with gold and made their choice. A pall of red dust hung over the plains, as if the earth itself were ashamed of what it had seen. Dawn didn't break over whispers. It leaked like blood through gauze. The town wasn't marked on any map, not anymore. Travelers passed by with their heads down, horses anxious, spooked by what they couldn't name. Whispers lived up to its name. Sound died in its streets. It was a place where the wind knew better than to howl, and even the birds forgot their songs. Colt Maddox rode into town with the dust. He didn't look back. Not at the 3 cowboys trailing behind him, nor at the long track of dead things they'd passed to get here. His eyes were set forward, as if fixed on something far beyond the sagging rooftops and cracked church bell. In truth, he didn't know what he expected to find. He'd heard the rumors, heard them from dying men in saloons, from drunkards weeping into their whiskey, from whores who whispered with eyes wide and unblinking. They said every woman in Whispers had been shaved bald. No one could say why. Colt dismounted with a grunt, boot hitting ground like a judge's gavel. He was a tall man, but the years had started to bend him inward, like time was trying to fold him into the ground before it was done with him. His right leg dragged a bit, stiff from a wound that refused to fully heal. He adjusted the weight of the satchel on his saddle, gold coins inside, wrapped tight in oilskin, heavy, like guilt. The others stayed mounted. They looked to him for the next move. They didn't speak. The silence of Whispers was contagious. He stepped through the threshold of the main street. The wind carried dust in slow curls, as if afraid to disturb the dead. But there were no corpses. Just absence. Curtains fluttered in broken windows. A rocking chair creaked on a porch, though no one sat in it. Then a figure moved. A woman. She darted between buildings, her head gleaming in the light. No hair, no hat, just bare, pale scalp. Colt watched her vanish, not startled, not even curious, just alert. Behind his weathered face, a fire smoldered low and constant. A voice broke the silence. "You got a death wish, stranger," rasped an old man from the shadows of the saloon doorway. He wore a hat too big for his skull, and boots 2 sizes too small. His beard was yellowed at the ends and clung to his jaw like moss on stone. Colt didn't look at him. "Name's Maddox. Looking for someone. You ain't gonna find peace here. Or answers." The old man stepped forward, revealing a shotgun that looked more ceremonial than functional. "But hell, you might find something else. Name's Ezra." Colt finally met his gaze. "I heard what happened to your women." Ezra's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes blinked. Pain, maybe, or the memory of it. "You heard part of it." "I got gold," Colt said flatly. "I see that. It won't help you." Colt glanced back at the street. More movement now. Women peering from windows, heads shining in the sun. Some older, some young, all bald, all silent. "I ain't here to buy," Colt said. "I'm here to trade." Ezra chuckled without humor. "Trade for what?" "For the truth." The saloon door groaned as Colt pushed through. Dust coated the tables like snow. A piano sagged in the corner, keys missing. He sat, without invitation, placing the satchel beside him. Ezra followed, taking the seat across from him like they'd done this 100 times. "You know," Ezra began, pouring them both a glass of something that smelled like rust and kerosene. "Before they came, this town had laughter. Kids ran in the streets. Women wore ribbons in their hair. They'd sing hymns so sweet you'd forget the world was on fire." Colt waited. Then the company men rolled in. Railroad contractors, they said. Promised work. Brought whiskey and coin. We welcomed them. Ezra's fingers tightened around the glass. "Shouldn't have." Colt nodded. "What happened?" "First it was little things, fights, women gone for a night or two, came back quiet, pale. Then the shaving started." "Shavings?" Ezra looked up. His eyes were sharp now. "They cut the hair, every strand, took it like trophies. Some say it was for punishment. Others say, control. You take a woman's hair, you take her pride, her spirit, After a while, they didn't talk anymore, just walked around, heads bare like ghosts. Colt stared into his drink but didn't touch it. My daughter went missing 6 months back, named Sarah, 12 years old. We were camped near Brimstone Ridge. Raiders hit us, killed my wife, took the girl. Ezra's eyes flickered. Brimstone's 2 days from here. She could have passed through. Colt nodded slowly. I followed the trail, paid men for whispers. Every path pointed here. Ezra was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "If she's here, she ain't the same girl no more." Colt finally drank. It burned, but he didn't flinch. Outside, a small sound broke the stillness. A child's footstep. Colt turned. A young girl stood in the doorway, bare scalp, eyes too old for her age. She wore a rough wool dress, torn at the hem. Her hands were empty except for a carved wooden horse. Colt's breath caught. The horse was his daughter's. He'd carved it himself, years ago, from a pine branch on her birthday. The tail had been broken off, just like this one. He stood slowly. "Where did you get that?" The girl didn't speak. She stepped forward and held it out. He knelt, reaching with trembling fingers. She let him take it. "Do you know Sarah?" he asked gently. Still, she said nothing, but she nodded once, deliberate. Colt's jaw tightened. Tears threatened but didn't fall. He stood and turned to Ezra. She was here. Ezra looked down. She might still be. Colt strode out of the saloon, fire burning in his limbs now. The other cowboys had dismounted. Ted, watching the street like dogs sensing a storm. The air felt charged, electric. He stopped in front of them. "She was here," he said. One of the men, a wiry blonde named Harlan, stepped forward. "Then what's the play?" "We find who took her," Colt said. "And we bury them." "No law here," Ezra said from behind. "Ain't been a sheriff since last winter. Just fear." Colt looked down at the satchel. Gold has a way of turning fear into fury. The townsfolk were watching. The bald women stood at doorways, eyes wide, uncertain. One of them, an older woman with a sun-wrinkled face, stepped forward. She didn't speak either, but she reached up with trembling fingers and touched the place where her hair used to be. Then she nodded. One by one, others followed. No words. Just presence. Unity. Colt turned to his men. "We make camp tonight. We ride at first light." "Where?" Harlan asked. Colt turned toward the horizon, where the sun bled into jagged hills. Where the screams went quiet. That night, Colt sat alone by a fire behind the church, the horse figurine in his hand. He turned it over and over, fingers tracing the old grooves. It still smelled faintly of pine and memory. He thought of Sarah, her laugh, the way she sang to the stars when she thought no one was listening. He remembered the fire, the men in masks, the way he'd crawled through ash and blood, calling her name. Redemption wasn't a word he believed in, but he'd ride toward it anyway. Behind him, a shadow moved. The girl stood again, watching. She said nothing, but she sat beside him, close. He didn't move. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her bald head, but her eyes were alive. And for the first time in a long while, Colt Maddox didn't feel alone. In the dark, someone wept. Maybe it was the wind, maybe not. Whispers had begun to speak again, and the truth had started to rise from the dust. The sky darkened earlier than expected, bruising with purple and copper as the horizon devoured the sun. Colt Maddox tightened the saddle strap on his mare, his hand moving with a mechanical familiarity, though his thoughts were far from the leather and steel. Each motion was a delay. Every moment he spent here was one Sarah spent further away, or deeper in whatever prison they'd put her. The girl with the bald head had not returned since the fire. She had vanished into the bones of the town, into the silence that clung to whispers like rot. Colt had searched for her that morning, not out of fear, but hope. She had known something, had seen Sarah, or maybe had walked the same path she did. Now, that trail was cold again. Ezra watched from the saloon window, a bottle in his hand and caution in his eyes. He had seen many men come to this place with fury in their guts. They didn't all leave. Colt turned to his men. Harlan, quiet and wiry with a scar like a crow's foot under his left eye. Boone, heavy-set, slow-speaking, but loyal enough to take a bullet if Colt told him it mattered. And Lyle, young, too green for this but full of nerves that made his trigger finger faster than his judgment. "You sure about this?" Boone asked, voice low. "No," Colt replied, adjusting his hat. "But I'd rather die chasing her than live knowing I didn't." Ezra stepped out then, coat dragging dust, his face squinting in the morning sun. "You'll need a guide. Roads past the Devil's Teeth aren't roads at all. More like forgotten wounds in the earth." "I ain't paying a guide," Harlan muttered. Ezra spat into the dirt. "Wouldn't charge you if I wanted to. You couldn't afford him." A second figure appeared behind him, silent as a shadow peeling from stone. Red Bear stepped forward, broad-shouldered, face stoic, his long black hair braided with bone and feather. His eyes scanned the cowboys, resting last on Colt. "This is your guide," Ezra said, nodding toward Red Bear. "He knows the old paths, ones made long before your maps, tracks that don't want to be found." Colt nodded, neither welcoming nor resisting. "You know where they took the girls?" Red Bear looked at him for a long breath, then nodded once. The journey began before noon. They crossed scorched land where nothing grew but memory, the landscape warped with heat and silence. No birds, no wind, just hoofbeats and the occasional click of saddle leather. Red Bear led without a word, navigating not by trail but by instinct, reading the land like scripture. They camped by a black rock that jutted from the ground like a broken tooth. Colt stared into the fire, rotating the horse figurine between his fingers. Boone passed a flask, but Colt waved it off. "You ever killed for something besides money?" Colt asked, eyes on the flames. Boone blinked. "Not really. Killed for pride once. Regretted it. Killed for spite another time. Didn't feel much." Colt looked over. "Would you kill for a girl you've never met?" Boone didn't answer. He didn't need to. Red Bear sat apart, sharpening a stone knife. Harlan approached him, the firelight casting long shadows. "You always this quiet?" Harlan asked, crouching nearby. Red Bear didn't look at him. "I speak when there's something worth hearing." Harlan chuckled dryly. "That's so. What's your stake in this anyway?" Red Bear finally looked up, his voice low and even. "They took someone from my people too. A child. Before your war. Before your gold." Harlan looked away. The next day brought wind. Harsh, stinging gusts that dragged dust across their faces like needles. They pushed through it, horses straining against invisible weight. The terrain became cruel. Crags and narrow passes, stones eager to twist ankles and snap bones. Midway through the second day, Red Bear raised a hand. The party stopped. Ahead, a clearing opened into a dry basin, and within it, remnants of a camp, burned-out wagons, bones half buried in the sand, and something worse, stakes driven into the earth, blackened rope still coiled around their bases. Colt dismounted. The ground crunched beneath his boots. He picked up a strand of scorched fabric, a dress, once pale blue. Sarah's favorite color. Boone found a ledger half buried near a shattered crate. It had no cover, but inside were names, ages, dates, a system carved in ink and cruelty. Colt read them aloud. Marjorie, 13, Lydia, 17, Sarah Maddox, 12. His voice faltered. Red Bear touched one of the stakes, then stood. This is where they were broken. not where they were kept. Colt's voice was hoarse. Where then? Red Bear pointed north toward a gash in the earth that shimmered with heat. They took them to the hollow. Lyle looked uneasy. You mean the mines? Red Bear nodded. No one goes there, Lyle added. Old shaft's been dead for years, caved in. They used the tunnels, Red Bear said. Safe from eyes, deep enough to forget the sun. Boone muttered. Sounds like a grave. It is, Red Bear said. One with breath. They made camp outside the basin. Colt couldn't sleep. Memories stirred like dust behind his eyelids. He saw his daughter again, eyes bright, hair in a braid, riding the old mare she named Clover. He saw the fire again, heard the screams, the smoke choking her name from his lungs. Red Bear approached without sound. He sat beside Colt, eyes forward. You carry grief like a knife in your chest, he said. It was my fault, Colt murmured. I should have seen them coming, should have done something. You were a father, not a god. Colt laughed bitterly. Feels the same sometimes. Red Bear reached into his satchel, pulled out a length of cord braided with beads and feathers. He handed it to Colt. What's this? A marker, Red Bear said. For the ones we seek, for the ones we lose. Colt took it carefully, nodding once. Words failed him. The mines appeared on the third day, crouching in the earth like a wound that never healed. A rusted chain hung across the entrance. Signs long faded warned of danger, collapse, poison gas. Nothing that could stop men who had already decided to die. They tied the horses at the ridge. Colt loaded both pistols, checked the rifle strapped to his back. Harlan unslung his repeater. Boone tested the knife on his belt. Red Bear lit a torch. The descent was slow. The air changed, thickened. It carried with it the breath of sorrow, sweat, and something else. Something wrong. Lyle went first, too fast. A board snapped. He fell hard. Colt dropped to his knees beside him. The boy was pale, eyes wide. I can't feel my leg, he whispered. Bone jutted through his trousers. Boone cursed, turning away. Colt looked at Red Bear. We can't carry him through. Red Bear was already pulling canvas from his pack, wrapping it around the boy's leg. You'll have to leave me, Lyle said. No, Colt snapped. You'll die if you don't, Lyle whispered. Colt looked into the boy's eyes, saw the fear there, the truth. He gave him the horse figurine. You hold on to this. When we come back, you hand it to Sarah. Lyle clutched it like a relic. They left him in a chamber near the surface, wrapped in blankets, a pistol beside him. Boone stayed behind, unwilling to leave the boy alone. Colt and Red Bear went deeper. The tunnels narrowed. The torchlight flickered over walls clawed with fingernails. There were words scratched into the stone. Pleas, names, prayers in languages Colt couldn't read. Then they heard it. Breathing. Not theirs. Dozens of breaths, thin and ragged. They came to a chamber, a cell. Women. Dozens of them. Heads, shorn, eyes wide, skin bruised and grey, but alive. Colt stepped forward. Sarah? A murmur rippled through them. Then, movement. From the far corner, a girl stood, small, slender. Her head was bare, her body wrapped in a blanket. Colt's heart stopped. Sarah? She stepped forward. Recognition flickered. Pa? Her voice cracked like old wood. Colt dropped to his knees. He caught her as she fell into his arms. She sobbed into his chest, clutching him like she feared he'd vanish if she blinked. Red Bear stood watch, eyes wet. Behind them, a clatter echoed. Footsteps. Voices. The captors had returned. Colt passed Sarah to Red Bear. Get her out. What about you? I'll hold them. Just get her safe. Red Bear nodded once, fire in his gaze. Colt turned, guns drawn. Outside, death waited, but so did purpose. He stepped into the dark. The tunnel pulsed with distant footsteps, thick and brutal, as if the mine itself was coming alive. Colt Maddox pressed his back to the jagged wall, breath shallow, ears tuned to every scrap of sound. His heart pounded not in fear, but in purpose. He was no longer a man running from ghosts. He had found one, and she had a name. Sarah. Red Bear's torchlight flickered deeper down the corridor as he moved with the girl tucked against his chest, her legs limp from starvation, her mind still unraveling. Yet she clung to him with the primal force of survival. She didn't need to trust him. She needed to live. That was enough. Colt waited until their silhouettes vanished into shadow, then turned toward the sound of men coming closer. The slavers. He could smell their breath now, tobacco and sweat and the grease of greed. They were laughing. Colt didn't know what about, but he knew what kind of men they were. He had seen it before. Men who confused ownership for power, who carved their control into the helpless and called it order. He didn't plan to kill them all, but he would. The first face came into view, half lit by the glow of a swinging lantern. Colt stepped from the wall with quiet deliberation and put a bullet in the man's throat before he could scream. Two more rushed forward. Colt dropped to a knee, fired once, then again. Both fell. He heard a shout, then boots pounding away, retreating. They knew they were outgunned, or at least surprised. Colt stepped over the bodies without pause. One of the dying men tried to speak. Colt didn't listen. By the time he emerged from the shaft into the cold light of morning, his coat was heavy with dust and blood. Red Bear stood nearby, Sarah in his arms, her eyes closed, her breathing thin but steady. Boone had returned with the horses, his face pale but jaw clenched. "She's alive," Red Bear said. Colt knelt beside her, touching her face with calloused fingers. "You're safe now." She stirred, her lips moved without sound. He leaned closer. "Don't let them." "Take me again," she whispered. "Never," he said, voice cracking. Lyle was alive too, barely. His leg was worse than expected. They splintered it with a rifle stock and a strip of saddle leather. Boone rigged a travois from 2 blankets and a lasso, and they took turns pulling him while Red Bear led the way back. The journey back to Whispers took 2 days. Every moment was measured in pain and patience. But when the town came into view over the ridge, it looked different. Smoke curled from the chimneys again. Doors were open. People stood in the streets, waiting. Word had traveled faster than the horses. When Colt rode in with Sarah before him, the silence cracked. A wave of whispered gasps spread through the people. Mothers reached for children, wives clutched husbands, a few dropped to their knees, not in prayer, but relief, recognition. Ezra stepped forward, hat in hand. "God damn, you actually did it!" "No," Colt said. "We started it." He turned, opened his saddlebag, and dumped the gold onto the dirt. Hit the ground with the weight of judgment, gleaming coins scattered like broken promises. People stared. "This gold wasn't for me," Colt said. "It was for a reckoning." Red Bear stepped forward. "This is your town, your shame, your silence. You can buy back your souls, or you can bury them." A murmur rippled. One woman stepped forward, her scalp still bare but her eyes alive. She didn't reach for the gold, she reached for Sarah, gently, reverently. The girl flinched, then leaned into her. A new tether formed. Woman to girl, survivor to survivor. More followed, not grabbing, not begging, standing, together. Ezra bent slowly, took 1 coin in his hand, then tossed it into the gutter. This gold didn't save us. He did. He looked at Colt. "You came here for your girl, but you gave back more than you took." Colt didn't answer. He was staring at the church bell. It was still cracked, still silent. But beneath it, something new stirred. Courage. That night, the fire was bigger than it had ever been. Women braided each other's hair, those whose locks had just begun to grow. Others shaved their own heads in solidarity. not in shame, but defiance. Sarah sat by the flames, wrapped in a wool coat too big for her. She watched her father from across the fire, as if memorizing him. Colt sat with Red Bear, passing a tin cup back and forth. Neither spoke for a while. Then Red Bear said, "You will carry her pain, not instead of her, beside her." Colt nodded. "That's all I can offer." "It's enough." Boone joined them, face drawn. "Lyle didn't make it." Colt closed his eyes. "He died trying to save something good. I buried him near the basin, under the black rock." Colt looked into the fire. He'd have liked that. The next morning, Colt saddled his horse. Sarah sat waiting, the horse figurine in her lap. Her fingers traced its edges over and over. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since the mines. It was like she didn't have any tears left. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "Somewhere quieter," he said. "Somewhere with wind and grass. Somewhere you can remember you're more than what they tried to take." She nodded. The townsfolk gathered again as Colt mounted. Ezra stepped forward, holding a bundle wrapped in cloth. Food, water, map of sorts. Colt took it. "Thanks. You ever come back through, I hope it's not for vengeance again." Colt gave him a look. "I hope I don't have to." He turned to Red Bear, who stood beside his horse. "You coming with us?" Red Bear shook his head. "My path goes east, but I'll watch the wind. If it changes, I'll find you." Sarah raised the horse carving toward him. He took it gently. "Keep the memory. I'll carry the spirit." And with that, Colt Maddox rode from Whispers with his daughter in his arms, her head pressed to his chest, listening to a heartbeat that had nearly died a dozen times but never did. Behind them, Whispers stirred. The women sang a hymn. Their voices were cracked but real. A sound louder than gold. Colt didn't look back. He didn't need to. Somewhere ahead, peace waited. Not perfect, not whole, but possible. And that was enough.